Welcome to the Industrial Edge podcast with me, Joe Haggis. In this podcast, we sit down with a broad range of professionals who are involved in a wide range of industrial settings. From maintenance and reliability professionals, facility managers, engineers, through to operations and production leaders, consultants, and business owners who support all things that keep the modern world we live in safe, productive, and efficient. We discuss the unique stories our guests have been on personally, while getting into some of the deeper details, challenges, and opportunities that face them in their particular industries and areas of specialisation. I hope you enjoy the conversation. So we've got Scott McMillan. Scott is the Director of Safety for Melbourne Park. Me and Scott worked together a couple of years ago now, during my time at Amazon. And Scott was specifically our reliability maintenance engineer and our RME safety manager, right, Scott? And you supported not just Australia, you supported other regions as well. You changed my approach on how I look at safety. I think, that's something that I want to say at the outset. You really changed, show me a different way of approaching safety, especially in a maintenance and industrial environment. So I thank you for that. And I think it's good to be challenged and shown different ways from maybe traditional approaches that I'd always seen. So I'm going to start with a question, Scott. What's the biggest misconception about safety that you challenge with your approach?
I guess the traditional or 99% of safety people is more is safer, and I challenge that as less is more in safety, but probably to an extreme. I'd say a lot of people go, yeah, I've made my procedure a bit simpler. I actually think the future of safety is probably no safety, and really that's just a byproduct of good business process. I guess with a background as a maintenance technician, I kind of never really gelled with safety professionals, and I always felt like that they kind of slowed me down and didn't really understand the nuances of work. Kind of took a bit of a sledgehammer approach to very simple problems, or simple problems, or really complicated problems. They don't really have the nuanced understanding of how to really make me safer. And it was a bit of a safety was for the business rather than for the individual. So I think the misconception is that it has to be filled. The role has to be filled by a safety professional. The best safety people I've met have no safety qualifications, no background, no interest. They just want to make the business a better place. And where it is safer because it's a better workplace. It's better organised. It's better maintained. It's got better maintenance, and better people, happier people working there.
Yeah, nice. I think I like what you say at the start, right? It's like less is more. I think that's something that, again, I took away from you in regards of kind of call it safety clutter, right? I suppose in this history of trying to strip back, there's a lot of things out there, lots of documents, lots of procedures. I always come back and use and reflect on, what I'm going to talk about now probably is the slide that you shared during one of the meetings, which was around, and you can probably help me explain this a little bit more. Let's say we were looking at, there was, 22, is it 22, Scott? You'll have to keep me honest, high risk operations procedures. And the key thing I'm trying to say here is there was about 650 times it said you must, you should, you shall do something. And I think that was a really good point of, how we're expecting technicians on the front line to remember. Maybe we're not expecting to remember them all, right, with the procedure, but a lot of the procedures were 25, 30 pages long. And again, like you say, making it simpler, right, which I think is really great.
But I think the stats are sobering, right? Like I think when I joined that business, I was pretty interested in, what worked. It was my third safety role when I joined you, and it was really interested in what worked in the previous companies and what didn't, and what was the approach I took with a trade person background was, kind of a little bit of sympathy for these technicians, operators, people that have got a day job and that have to try and also understand a complicated, often confusing safety management system. And the stats from that 36 documents that we were reviewed was like 57,500 words when you added them up. Which doesn't mean anything, but if you read them back to back, that's about 9 hours of straight reading. We had an average of 22 pages per procedure. 56 was the amount of rules and instructions, which are should, shall, or must. So you should do something, you shall do something, or you must do something. And there's 51 times. The thing that stood out the most for me was there's 51 times where we said you have to follow local regulations, laws or regulations, but we didn't actually explain what that meant. And I think, well, how are you supposed to do all the right things when you have such a huge burden as a technician on top of your normal job? And you go, well, if we as a safety profession aren't helping to demystify those 51 local legislative requirements, well, what are we doing? And we're just kind of setting people up to fail by reviewing what the legislation is after we think they've made a mistake. And I kind of think that's the wrong way around. We need to, and we're a support team, right? We're, with no business, there's no safety. It's not a, logistics company. It's a logistics company, not a safety company that does logistics. So I think you got to rethink, safety people have to start rethinking their role as a support person rather than just someone that's there to advise. You're actually there to make the business better. And if you're not making the business better, you're actually slowing it down, even if you're just sitting still. So it's a bit of a challenging view for safety professionals, but mostly because they live in the administrative world and they're comfortable living down in that level in the hierarchy of control around administration or PPE, because that's their game. That's their bit that they're most comfortable with. But with an electrical background, I'd rather work higher up the hierarchy of control around elimination, engineering. I'll write a procedure if I have to, but you'll be dragging me to do it. Whereas I'm trying to drag the conversation higher up to, well, how do we engineer it out so I don't have to write a procedure? If there's no hazard, then we don't need to bother about a document.
Yeah, you were an electrician, right? And you spent a good bit of your career as an electrician, the majority of your career even now, I think, looking at your career history as an electrician. Talk to us about your time. You spent some time at Melbourne Water. You spent some time on some FIFO roles, Antarctica, the Cocos Islands as well, some remote places. Talk to us about, those early days of being an electrician, what you kind of, and again, maybe relating it back to safety, but safety and maintenance. But you sort of reflection on that time in the early part of your career, pre-becoming let's say a safety professional.
Yeah, I think I've done safety a little bit more now. Might just be at the tipping point now of my career, which is a bit, there's a point to reflect on personally, I think, of what my career really is. And now I'm a safety person that was an electrician, not an electrician, but a safety person. But I think my career started out, at 18, not knowing what I was going to do. Someone said, why don't you be a tradie? This pays well. It's enjoyable role. Okay, I'll do that. And I actually started doing 2 trades of electrical work, but instrumentation as a second trade, which is more, the process automation side of things in heavy process sites. And I did that at Melbourne Water, but it was a major hazard facility that I spent a lot of my time. So there's about, 40 to 45 major hazard facilities in Victoria. Bulk chlorine storage. It had a power station. It created methane gas. It was obviously biological hazards at a sewage treatment plant, but amazing piece of engineering, huge site, probably one of the world's most advanced large-scale sewage treatment plants. And I loved it, but I, really quickly started to learn there's probably more out there in the world to test out. So I really wanted to understand what else was out there. Is this the best job in the world or is it the worst? I had no real benchmark for that. So went off, tried the fly in, fly out world for a little over a year. Thought, this is pretty cool. Get to work 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. But I found the work. This is when I started to think like, I don't know where I'm going to go with this, because I found the work quite simple, repetitive, and that's fine. That's fine for some people, but I think I needed a bit more of a challenge, and I need to. If my brain's not occupied, it'll kind of go to mush. That beautifully dovetailed into an opportunity to go to Antarctica, and that was 6 months of installing and commissioning a sewage treatment plant, an advanced sewage treatment plant at one of the research stations. Amazing experience, amazing life-changing experience. great crew, great people, and great work. But when I came back, it was a bit of a moment of, oh, what am I going to do next? I think I'd kind of felt like that was the pinnacle of my trade career. There was nothing wrong with being an electrician, but it probably wasn't getting me, I wasn't getting enough out of that anymore. And that kind of, that was the moment where an old colleague that I'd worked with at Melbourne Water had moved into the safety team. And the best way I remember it is her saying, hey, why don't you come and help me out with some casual work? We need to kind of convert some of this engineering documentation and procedure into something that can work for the actual workforce. So there was already a bit of a glimmer of hope there. I don't think I was really that interested in it at the time, but I needed a job, and she was amazing to work with. Thought I'll give it a go, and very quickly realised that there was 3-6 months in, it started to click that there is a huge gap here of people that can do this, that can convert this corporate legalese and turn it into something that someone that actually has to do the job can do. And that's really where it started. Melbourne Water was an amazing place because we had, it's a heavily regulated industry. It's a, essential service. We have these major hazard facilities. It's self-insured, which means in the safety world where you don't have you insure yourself from a work cover perspective, and that means that there's a high level of regulation to make sure you have systems in place to be part of that scheme. So if we could innovate safety there, it kind of made me realize you can kind of do it anywhere. And then we just spent years simplifying, streamlining, standardizing our approaches, our procedures, and then starting to look at immersive technology and technology in general. How do we actually just hide safety into operational processes? We didn't get it all right, but we absolutely, I think still there's a bit of a legacy there from that team of moving the business forward. People won't necessarily know what that is, but that was kind of the amazing point of going, oh, this is probably the best job I'm ever going to have.
Would you say that was like your peak part, or was that just because you were maybe new into the safety profession? There was a lot of opportunity there to improve. How was your mindset developed, or how have you developed since joining Melbourne Water in the safety team? And again, like you say, you're putting safety within the operation, which is good, right? And making it a part of good business. I always like that saying you say. Talk us through. You spent a bit of time at Transurban, and then Amazon, and now Melbourne Park. How have you used what you learned there to challenge the way those companies apply safety and manage safety, should we say? Talk to us about how you use that skill set in those other businesses and in your current role now as director of safety.
Yeah, I think the key lesson is consultation. The first projects I would have run at Melbourne Water on my own, I would have been mid-20s, thinking I probably knew everything when I was in my mid-20s, like most people did. And I remember, standing in front of an audience of tradies and operators and people that I'd worked with before and people that I hadn't, trying to change a procedure on how they do isolations or lockout tagout, and something that's really important to how they do these high risk jobs, and just getting shot down because I hadn't consulted well enough. So I think I learned about personal power over professional or positional power. People only want to work with you if they kind of like you or understand what you're doing and that they're on board with your ideas. So I think the thing I learned there was, the connection with the people that you're trying to work with is key. Doesn't matter how great your idea is. If people don't like you or respect you, then they're just going to rebel against it. So I think I've just taken that everywhere now around. And the common thread, I guess, in every company is a few that I have a lot of empathy for contractors that have to work at multiple sites. I think it's really easy for someone that works in one workplace to think, well, this is my requirement for coming to the site. These are my safety rules. But if you're a service technician working at, 10 sites in one company, and then you work for 10 companies, there's just absolutely no way you're going to be able to realistically remember any of that content that we've made you do in a safety induction. So a lot of it is about going, well, what's the commonality between these sites? And then you start going, with Transurban, it was across different states and countries. So it's like, well, what's the things we can standardize here that makes it a lot easier? and then moving into, Amazon, that was kind of the same thing on a broader scale across Australia, Singapore, and this rest of world region. But the most exciting thing about Melbourne Park is that it's probably a bit of a Goldilocks sized company where, it's a little bit under and maybe 200 permanent employees, a real appetite for change, a healthy understanding of risk, and a healthy understanding of the show must go on. And where you've got a huge amount of people, millions of people coming through your doors every year. And so you have to really be critical on what it's the things they need to tell these employees, these patrons, these contractors, because the workforce changes so quickly, and we can't induct patrons, and you've never done an induction to go to an airport, you've never done an induction to go to a concert, so and most people kind of come out of it alive. So what is it that we're doing differently in a workplace, and how can we challenge that just because you've come through a security gate means now I have to kind of bombard you with this information that I think is there to protect the company, but it really just does nothing. So I think that's the common thread, is about working with people to go, what risk are we really trying to manage, and how do we engage with the audience so it's not seen as something that's slowing me down. It's like, oh, that safety team actually helped make my life easier. Not all the time. We never get it all right. But then having the humility to go, I stuffed up. I haven't got that right. I'm sorry. And kind of taking the wind out of people's sails if they're ready to come in for a battle. You go, well, no. I put my hand up and say I didn't get that right. But if you're not giving it a go, you're probably not trying hard enough. If you're not making mistakes, you're probably not pushing hard enough.
Yeah, nice. I like that piece around ownership, right, and supporting people, taking ownership if if you don't get it right in terms of the approach to and the way you're guiding people, should we say? I really like your point, Scott, around like you say, we don't induct people. We're recording this a few weeks after the Australian Open, obviously the biggest event. I'm pretty sure for you guys there at Melbourne Park. That's a busy time for you. And what I'm trying to say here is, how do you manage an event like that with so many people? You do a lot of planning, preparation to that. What does that look like for you in your role and the build up to the Australian Open?
Yeah, it probably comes back to, this is my second Australian Open that we've just gone through. And the last one was amazing, but I think this one was even better because I think we were a bit more well prepared for it. And once the event starts, it's kind of too late to make a lot of change, right? Like the work you did in the year leading up is what really makes the difference. Once you're there, it's really just kind of keeping on top of things, incidents that pop up, you're more reactive. So what we did mostly throughout the year is we brought on a diverse team. So we had a builder we've joined the team as one of our safety officers. So he's a construction safety manager, we're calling him, but he's out there. He specializes in temporary structures. He's a licensed builder. He has a lot of relationships with the people that are building the Australian Open event from other places, and he's out there all day, every day, looking for improvements, looking for issues before they happen. But he's doing it in a way that, as a peer, once again, like not doing it as someone holding clipboard telling you you're doing it wrong. He actually has some great ideas on how to do it better. So we're he's not a safety person, but he is the best safety person because of that. We brought in an event manager who's doing a development plan, and she's doing an amazing job because she comes with a different level of experience. We've got a mechatronics engineer from Deakin University that we work with, so he looks at it differently. So the preparation we do through the year is all about engineering those issues out. So looking at the designs of the buildings, looking at how do we bump things in and out, how do we do complex crane interactions, which is done in a very tight footprint. How do you kind of schedule all of that and remove any barrier so they can do their job more safely? And then once the event starts, it's really about responding to any incidents and issues that come up as quick as possible. And that's probably stepping into areas that aren't traditionally yours, because during an event like that, it's just all hands on deck. And that's the exciting bit. You go and do anything in every day because there's no PD or role. There's no role, there's nothing in a PD that covers most of the things that happen every day. So you've just got to get stuck into it.
Yeah, nice. Rolling up the sleeves.
Yeah.
Especially like the part you mentioned, like you've got a diverse team, right? Which I think is great. You've got people, different experiences, different backgrounds, different genders, right, etc. You're building a really, well made up team and a diverse team, right? Which I think is good, and that sounds like it's working well in terms of having different opinions, etc. Which is great. Good, mate. Got to get into it. Keeping on safety theme, Scott. Talk us through now. I think we've probably touched on it actually here, Scott. I've got why traditional safety approaches don't work. Where do they fall down in the real world? The next one I've got here is work as imagined versus work as done. Do you reckon we spoke about that enough, or do you reckon there's a bit more we can discuss on that? So, I suppose again, coming back to how we imagine work, what's how maybe a senior leader might see it in an organization versus the work as it's actually done. Talk us through maybe your experience with that and where you've seen it maybe do well. And again, I think you've already touched on a few examples of where you have seen it do well. You've mentioned Melbourne Water, how you blend it into those operational procedures, maybe disguise it, or I don't know if disguise it's the right word, but and then on the contrary, where have you seen it not done well in terms of just complete disconnect in your experience?
Yeah, good call. It's like the concept kind of speaks to itself, right? We sit in a boardroom, we sit in the office, and we think about, I don't know, an isolation if we're talking to a mechanical engineering audience. This is how the lockout tagout works for this conveyor section. So you can say, yeah, it's really simple. You turn the airline off, you turn the power off to the conveyor, and you disconnect the PLC so it can't get a start command. Cool. That sounds really simple, right? But then when you go out there, you realize that the controller for the motor for the conveyor is actually on the other side of the conveyor belt, and your company has a very strict policy on climbing over conveyor belts, which most would. So although it's 1 meter away, technically, you actually have to walk about 100 meters to go to the end of the conveyor, up the staircase, over, and then come back down to isolate it, to then go back the other way, go up the stairs and come back over to start work. And you're doing this in a really short time frame. So, as an example, you'd say, well, it's really simple. Turn it off, do this. You've got, that takes 2 seconds. But in reality, the work is done is actually you've pushed someone, you've encouraged them by making the process difficult to climb over or to do the work live or to just use the PLC to stop the conveyor rather than isolate the power. So I think and there's no way you can predict those things without walking the floor, right? But I think it works really well when you actually ask genuinely, how do I do this? So I think this comes back to humility of, I have no idea how your workplace works, Joe. I don't need to. You're the expert. And people love talking about what they do every day. So go out and ask them and say, hey, mate, how do I isolate this in the real world? And they'll tell you, they won't hold back. Like, they'll tell you everything, the good, bad, and ugly, because they're just doing whatever they can to get the job done. Just write that down. Like, you just write that down rather than trying to write in the boardroom. Go out and see, and then reverse that engineer it. You might find an opportunity to improve, a 5% opportunity. But those opportunities are generally things that the company can do. And that's the bit that we need to start doing, is be more self-reflective as managers. Whether you're a safety manager or a maintenance manager, start to be a little bit more curious about why people make mistakes. Humans will always make a mistake. That's built into us. So it's not very impressive to write in an investigation, that human error. Like, well, humans always make error. So how do we change that and start being more inquisitive about how the work is really done, and then make that as safe as possible? So that's kind of the sentiment of it. And I think it works really well everywhere because not many people do it. It sounds really simple, and I would say most people think that they're doing it, but um, it's not about writing more. Like I said, it's not about writing more. It's about really simple processes, and then what can you do to then take it further to make your process even simpler? So it's about moving that motor isolator to the other side. So it's right there, and that's engineering out the hazard of pushing people to break the rules.
Yeah, nice. And I think, you've touched on that. I was going to bring that up around, designing equipment with, I talk about this with a few other people, but, maintainability, safety in mind, making it easy, making it accessible. Like you say, isolators in the right place, um, you know, not creating those temptations for people to cut corners, right? And it's easy for us to say that, like you say, in a procedure, but in reality, when you've got to walk 100 meters round, the job might, I'm not saying this is okay, but the job might take 5 or 10 seconds. You're kind of building this temptation of people
Yeah.
to cut corners, right? So you've got to make it easy. You've got to make it simple. And again, you could do that through design, but it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be super expensive, that, right? Just moving an isolator to the other side. Normally there's enough slack in the cable to move the
Totally.
isolator, put it on the other side. It doesn't have to be these big complex things, right? A lot of the time. I think that's something that's worth mentioning when you're designing for safety and safety with safety in mind, right?
I think like ergonomic design is, and I don't want it in like the, bending your back, bending your knees before you to protect your back. It's things like that, isolation locations and things like that. And they're really hard to do looking at a schematic, looking at a plan. You really have to be out there. And that's probably one that we had a lot of success with at Melbourne Waters, where we started to do virtual reality design reviews. And that was to kind of remove that tension between the designers and the operators. And I talk about it a lot, that there was this, two groups. I used to do it a lot. I used to be the instrumentation electrical representative on large scale treatment plant upgrades on some sites. And you'd sit there with a pile of drawings in this boardroom with the design team, and they'd be telling you this is how it'll work. It's going to be built here. It's going to be great. Tell us if you see any issues with the design. And we'd look at it and go, oh, this looks very impressive. It's a really impressive pile of drawings. Catering was great and all those things. But we would, and then we'd leave the room with very, very minor adjustments made. And then a year later, you'd go and look at the plant that's 95% done, and you'd find you'd walk around, you'd say, why is the valve there? Why is the switchboard there? How do I get into this? Why have you created this confined space when you didn't need to? And they would be hitting their heads against the wall, being like, the designer would say, why didn't you tell us this earlier?
Yeah, we consulted with you on this one-dimensional drawing.
Bloody oath. And we thought, these people are idiots. How could they not have seen these issues when they designed it? But it was just the medium wasn't working. The one-dimensional drawings weren't working. And people would say, yeah, well, we did a 3D fly-through. It's not the same. You've got to go to one-to-one. So we started doing that in virtual reality for major projects. And we'd find that, the first one we did as a trial was we picked up 6 hazards in the process traditionally, and then we picked up another 14 in the virtual reality design. And that became a bit of a standard, and that got picked up by the UN International Labour Organization. They took that as a case study for global. They took that as a case study for emerging the future of developing nations. I think it was around how do you build a city quickly when you've got a new city being built. But those things, that was an amazing change, because you kind of democratized the way that these design reviews are done. And it meant you could get in cleaners and tradespeople, and rather than getting one representative in 2 days, you'd get 10 in 1 day. And it really changed the game. So I think those things, once it's been built, it's really hard. But any of that stuff about, it costs nothing to do. So I think the more we can think about that earlier, we've got so much more influence, but we're not really thinking about the maintainability until it's too late. And so it's a bit for like designers and for project managers to get the right people, and to maybe change the way projects are rewarded project completion. It's not completed once you've handed the keys over. Like there's a decent tail on that. So how do you kind of incentivize people to think about the maintainability of it rather than just the completion date?
Yeah, it's nice. It's a great thought around. Again, I think from my view, as I probably see it, is the industry's probably evolved in terms of, well, we're at least consulting you now, and that's maybe the first step. Here's the one-dimensional drawing, like you say. But like you said, there's evidence there of, you pick maybe 6 hazards up in that one-dimensional drawing. But the next step is, and where sort of technology is going, like you say, and you proved it by finding more than double the amount of hazards is in that one-to-one virtual reality modeling, right? So, and again, I think that's the next step for designers when they're thinking about that. It's not enough to just consult and show the designs and say, hey, go on the BIM or whatever it may be, the building information modeling, go and have a look at that and let us know what you think, right? They've got to actually genuinely consult, and a good way of doing that, like you mentioned. And great, like it's a great case to do that. And I know that's work you did with universities, right? I think it was it Monash or was RMIT universities, right? Which is really good.
Yeah, that was with Deakin Uni, but
Deakin, sorry.
Yeah, and they have an amazing immersive technology lab that they work on a lot of training, immersive high risk training for us. I think though the cynic in me, like I'm generally pretty optimistic, but I've been, we did this in 2017, 2018. And if I talk to people about this now, it's still a new concept for them. So I think we need a bit of a shake up. And when people start doing it, it's hard to convince them until they've done it. It sounds a bit gimmicky, but once you actually do it, you go, oh my God, how do we not do this? It's like going from a wind up window to electric windows or something, or a car with no air conditioning to air conditioning, like these things that, in the 80s we wouldn't have, or 90s wouldn't have wanted, but it's just the absolute obvious thing to do.
Yeah,
and
nice.
I think the more of that, the more we can do of that, the better. Those types of, simple changes.
Yeah, absolutely. My next question was around technology and innovation in safety. You've talked about virtual reality, which is good. I always remember, you were looking at different technologies again when we worked together. I always remember the electronic lotto lock and just even things like that, right? Bringing them in, touching them, feeling them, having a look at them. How do they work? We didn't adopt that, but at least, challenging the way things are done, right? I think is good, right? And looking at those different technologies and challenging those perspectives, which is good. Is there any other technologies or any other innovation that maybe you've done at Melbourne Park, or that you'd want to touch on, or anything that maybe interests you that you've been working on? I know you spent some time with the Australian Institute of Health and Safety. You had them down at Melbourne Park. So is there anything around? I'll try and I can't avoid using the word AI. Every single podcast I've done, we spoke about AI in depth actually, but talk us through maybe what the future looks like in terms of innovation, maybe AI in safety. I don't know what that looks like. What does that look like right now? What are you working on or using from a technology perspective to help make safety more ingrained, like you say, in operations, etc.?
Yeah, for sure. I think that, like, I love to digitize safety systems because once it's in the computer, then you can keep up with the new technological changes. You can start to implement AI and things like that. But what my focus generally is, for the most part, is it's a bit about like eating your veggies before you can have dessert. Like the key thing to do is, to start streamlining your processes first. So in safety, like to get a business ready to digitize and to start using new technology, you've got to look at your procedures and your processes like they need to be turned into code. And what I think normally, what I see happen a lot is we have a terrible process, a really complicated permit to work system, lockout, tagout process, isolation permit. And everyone hates it, so we want to digitize it because once it's digital, it'll be better. But if you digitize a crap process, it's just a crappy digital process, and then it's even harder to change. It forces people to follow the process that wasn't very good in the first place. Whereas when it's written, you can kind of skip the bits in the permit book that don't really work. Doesn't really matter. No one really fills that section out. when you put an asterisk next to it in the digital platform, now I've got to fill it in. So I've got to come up with
Yeah,
something.
I'm with you.
So I think that's the challenging but meaningful bit, is to go, all right, well, what are we going to do to set ourselves up? First, we've just got to clear the backlog of projects. Like my approach is normally that, like, get the team ready, clear the backlog, and then start doing the proactive work. And the tech that's exciting is things like, robotic process automation, where you can kind of connect two systems that don't have an API that allows you to connect it. So you can automate an administrative task with I guess the end goal of all of it is to allow people to focus their time on higher value tasks. So planning and isolation, planning maintenance on a piece of equipment, planning ahead their forecast of their downtime, what are they going to do in the shutdown. And so it's about removing all that low value work, which is what the future of safety technology can do. A big part with AI is, analyzing and doing investigations, analyzing incident data and doing investigations. The one of the safety issues with safety that I see a lot is this obsession with investigations. And I use Taproot. This person uses ICAM. I use Five Eyes. I do a fishbone. Like, it all kind of doesn't matter to me. It's all the same thing. It's all looking to find, like, what were the failures that created that incident, that we can prevent it happening again. But most people love to go down the human error, like we've talked about. They love to talk about where did that person make a mistake, rather than that self-reflection to go, what did the company do to set that person up? And we can go through I could do a 6-week investigation on something to try and find some root causes, and it could be a great piece of work. But then we don't really do anything with the actions. So what I'd like to do with AI, and what we're looking at to do, is say, well, here's all the information we know. Let's train a bot on to be a really good investigator. It can ask us some questions. Where are our gaps? What do you need to know more about? And in a day, it can create the same outcome, or let's say 80% of that same outcome. If companies are genuine about implementing those actions, great. Like that is so much more efficient, because generally when you do a big investigation in safety, everyone then just argues about, the findings. I don't like those findings. I find those offensive. Joe, they're a critique on your team, so you're pushing back on them. So I have to water them down, and then they're a reflection on the safety team, and they don't want that. I think if we can kind of just cut all of that out and get AI to do it, to analyze what happened, feed all the data in, and then spit it out in a really nice, simple template, that's kind of the goal for me. But I think the probably the technologies that are the most valuable aren't really what we're thinking of as the traditional technology. It's animation, and things like that. I think there's
Okay.
no production. So I'm really big on trying to animate lessons learned, or how do we do digital notice boards and things like that to get information to people in a more digestible way. I think that's a really, really untapped piece of technology. We're still just sending documents and things out and emails out like it's the 90s. Nothing's really changed. So how do we kind of change the medium how do we do text messages? How do we do alerts and things like that? We've got Teams now. Why can't we send something in Teams or Zoom on, in any of those platforms? So I think that's where we're going, mate. Like well, that's where I'm going, to just try and make things a bit more engaging rather than just tech for the sake of tech. The last thought on it is that everyone will have a safety platform, and it's the same as a maintenance, a CMMS. It's the same thing. They're really just a fancy scheduler or spreadsheet a lot of the time, right? Like they're a database. So I think sometimes it's like buying a wedding bouquet versus a normal bouquet of flowers. Like you're just paying extra for the branding. A lot of the stuff you can do around online databases and things is actually like the no frills, not calling it a safety management system, not calling it a CMMS. There's so many platforms that smaller companies can use without these big investments in, the Maximos and of the world.
Yeah. There's quite a lot to pick up on there, Scott. I think the first point I'd make is around, I really like your point around you've got to have your veggies before your dessert. And there's nothing more, I think there's a saying, right? You don't want to optimize a process that shouldn't exist,
Yeah, yeah,
ultimately. So
love
you're
that.
absolutely spot on. You've got to get the fundamentals and the foundation right, is what you're saying there. Is what I'm taking away. And you don't want to put a digital form that is already poor, and again, like force people to again mark into them boxes that have got the asterisks. I think that's a really good point you mentioned. Um, and just try to think through your response there, just around making it like animation. I think that's a great point you mentioned. Videos, sharing safety alerts, not just in a paper or in an email form, whatever that may be, but actually making it engaging, using video, using media, that sort of thing, and things that have existed for a long time, but again, like you say, haven't maybe been tapped into to share, a toolbox or whatever that may be to try and increase awareness and help people make better decisions, right, at the end of the day. So yeah, really good, some really good points there, mate.
Well, I think
um
on the digitizing a bit though is if you can, the exciting thing with digitizing your safety system or your maintenance system is that it forces you down that, like you don't have to have a procedure or training on it because it's so intuitive, right? And it's about, if you can connect things, you can just automate the bureaucracy so people can work through it, right? Like the work order, follows through to the safety system. All the systems can be interconnected. So it just removes the bureaucratic bits. So you can, it doesn't mean that it's not about throwing it all away and saying you don't need any of the systems. It's just about, how do you, when you're implementing a digital platform, call it a CMMS, a safety management system, like it's so easy to go, oh, I love this data, so I'm just going to add this checkbox to it so that, I want to know that you've uploaded your risk assessment. So I'm going to add that as a field. I'm going to make it mandatory. It's so valuable. But that's kind of about making it easy for me rather than the workforce. And I can make this one simple decision that has a massive impact on, a huge amount of people with very little oversight or review into my business decision. It's about going, well, how do we just make it as simple as possible? How do we streamline our questions and our processes so I can get all that information in another way? It might make my life harder, but easier for you. So it's just constantly got to think about, how do you make it easier for the workforce to follow the right process? And
yeah,
that's
nice.
the power of these systems. That's what if they're not doing that, they're not working.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, again, keeping the people, and again, you've been on the front line, you've been an electrician, you understand that, right? You understand them challenges, and again, I think that's unique, right? Because it allows you to have that perspective and appreciate, and remind yourself of those times again where you were maybe filling in a really long isolation permit or whatever that may be, right? So again, keeping yourself and keeping the end user in mind, I think is absolutely key, which is good.
What's your to turn it on you, like, what do you see working and not working about the safety industry? You've worked with plenty of safety people as a maintenance person. Like, what sorts the good from the bad?
It's a great question. I think again, I'm very aligned with a lot of what you mentioned, and that's a sort of get out of jail free answer. But again, I think it's not easy enough. The reality of remember a time being a maintenance manager. It's not always like that. But when it is chaotic, it's busy. Let's say you're planning a really busy piece of work ahead of time. I think the planning and scheduling for me is like doing planning and scheduling well, leads to better safety outcomes, like planned work, reducing reactive work. So trying to inherently um, make the site safer and make the team safer, should we say, by just executing business well, like you mentioned. But again, at the same time, when you come to a crossroad, it's been able to get a safety person to support you in actually making a decision of how do we do things, how to actually get around this challenging or this curly topic. And again, these examples that I remember when I worked with you, and again, there's not always a silver bullet, right? There's not always a clean answer, and people will have different opinions. But I think for me, it's around having someone in safety that's engaged. They come out to the job with you, they look at the task, and you have a good conversation about how to do it in the safest way possible, right? And yeah, how do we reduce the risk? Yeah, ultimately. But yeah, it's got to be engaging. I take your point on that as well, right? You've got to make safety engaging. It's easy to, as soon as you maybe say, "Hey, let's do this. Let's talk about this topic on safety." Sometimes you'll see people, and I know you said this, like you'll see people maybe switch off or not be engaged. And a way around that is again making it engaging. Consult with people, get them on side in terms of supporting them and knowing that you've got their back in what am I trying to say here? You've got your back. But you'll support them, right? I think that's the key part. You're a
Yeah.
support function, and like you say, without a business doing what it needs to do, safety function doesn't exist in a business.
Yeah, it's a hard, but I'm also empathetic for safety people. Like, it's a really hard industry to work in because you can only influence. You have very little authority over how business operates. And so, as a maintenance manager, you're far more powerful safety manager than the actual safety manager is the ironic bit. Like, you can make so many decisions that will impact safety in a far greater way than I generally can. So it's about finding those people, finding the likes of you and, that go, "Oh, I think this guy gets it. I think he will get it." And partnering up with you to support you so you can be a better leader because you're already doing it. You don't need me. You just need someone to kind of back you when you're making decisions. And I think that's the hard bit in safety is, like I say, like, you might be the most senior person in business, but you don't directly control the way the operations and maintenance work. And so if you can't influence, you can't do anything. And this decision paralysis is partially because they don't have the authority to make decisions. But there is a bit about going, well, the world is grey. Like, we can make a clear rule for 80, 90%, but at some stage you got to go, "I'm going to put my hand on my heart and I'm going to make this decision because it's going to make your life easier." Sometimes you won't even like it, but at least you get the clarity. And I think clarity is everything, right? You've got a clear path forward. People respect that even if they don't agree with it. But it's a hard job. And so I think there is a bit about, like, understanding where they're coming from, but you've got to drag them out there too. And I would say to people that listen, like, you've got to hold them to a high standard to say, if you want to, you need to understand before you make a decision and add another procedure or process or another check box in the checklist, you come and do the job, you come and see it, and you do the night shift and you experience what it's like before you do that, because I'm not accepting anything that you haven't experienced firsthand. And this is probably why, I still do it, and it embarrasses me to do it, but it's important to do, is I open with, "Oh, I'm the safety manager, but I'm an electrician by trade." So, and you see people just calm down. They go, "Oh, okay, this guy will get it." Still a little bit suspicious, but because otherwise you go, "Oh, geez, it takes a long time." Like, it speeds up that process. If you don't do that, it can take you years before they start to trust you. When you do that, you're like, "Yeah, he probably gets it." So you don't have to be a tradie to do that, but you have to be able to show that, straight away you appreciate what the people that do are doing, that
Yeah.
you work with are doing.
Yeah, and you mentioned it a few times, like being humble, having humility, right? And again, being genuinely open to listening to people, and learning from and listening to what they say when they do a job and listen to their pain points, right? Just by having that conversation. But just going to pick up on something you just mentioned around what did you say? The circumstances, right? Like, you can have a procedure. It doesn't look at if it's day or night or what the weather. A lot of the time, like the conditions and the time of year.
Yeah,
Like, again, going back to for yourself, Australian Open, busiest time of year. Like, all these operational pressures. The volume's a lot higher. So again, it's a completely different environment, I'm sure, right now than it was 3 or 4 weeks ago. Right? It's a completely different environment. And when we just give it a cookie cutter approach of, hey, here's the procedure, doesn't matter if it's the men's grand final or if it's the middle of winter, maybe when it's quieter down that area. It depends, right? On the operational context matters, is what I'm trying to say.
totally. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's the exciting, and risk is dynamic. I think that's probably the key thing we've learned. One process, so we rolled out at Melbourne War, and I can't take the credit for it, but is around this good to go, and it was kind of a concept of, hazards and risks are kind of the same. Electricity and the light. It's not dangerous unless you start playing around with the light. If you're qualified as an electrician, doing electrical work's pretty safe. It's these things that the threats are the things that we want to start thinking about, and they're the things that are unique. That a threat of things that bring the hazards to life is the way we talk about it, and that would be things like I've been called into the middle of the night, so I'm tired. I normally do a day shift, and you called me in the middle of the night. That's one threat. One might be I don't know this site very well. I've never worked here before, so I'm fault finding on a machine that I don't know. The third might be it's outside and I'm at a kiosk, trying to fault find in the middle of the night and it's dark. So you'd say there are three threats. And that the bit that we want there is for people to stop and think. At some stage, you need to just pause and go, this is not right. By kind of articulating those to say one or two is probably okay, keep going, but do it cautiously. But at some point we've got to go I can't do this job safely. Takes a lot longer when you short out the fuse and things, or you blow up the switchboard, right? So, or you stuff the conveyor. So it's better to wait there and ask for help and just remove one of those threats. I went and found the drawings. It took me 5 months longer. So I think that the dynamic risk is the key. People love to talk about 5x5s, and none of that really works if no one could really do it. 100 people could do it and give a different answer. But it's about that classic, I think putting it in perspective to go, if you catch the train to the football, you are gonna, probably gonna you're gonna go to an unguarded platform with a 50-ton train coming past it. You've had 3 beers beforehand. You've gone to a site that you've never been inducted to. You're sitting with all these people you don't know. Some of them had more beers than you. And you go home and generally you're okay, right? If any of that stuff happened in the workplace, we'd shut it down. We'd probably send you home for your last day. So we deal with risk all day, every day. People are doing it. You got to kind of tap into that rather than trying to add it to the top of people's day to day in this academic way that isn't really grounded in any science or the way humans operate. So I think the change from hazard, risk, control, thinking about threats is really good, just to kind of keep your mind focused on what are the things that are different today. And that's kind of what we have to do every day in the events. Everything's different. You can't say the show must stop. You've got to keep going, but you've got to do it in a safe way.
Yeah, nice. And like you say, right, I think that's bringing it back to what we do naturally as humans every day, right? Is we're always making a judgment on those threats, like you say. I think that's I really like that approach of the 3 threats. And it's, again, I suppose the challenge is getting people to recognize the threats, because it's dead easy. Middle of the night, like you say, you're already tired, so therefore you maybe cognitively not thinking about, hey, 3 threats, and making it simple for people, right? But again, try to recognize those signs, and to think, hold on a minute, let's stop and reevaluate. Take 5, sure we will, without filling in the nice little document that I know you so love.
Well, they're the things, though. Once again, as a maintenance manager, you call it a pre-mortem rather than a post-mortem. But go and think about that. Okay, if I had to come out in the middle of the night, I worked on this power. I worked at the Cocos Islands for a little while, and I had to. I was the only electrician on these islands in the middle of nowhere, and so I had to run the power station, the water treatment, the wastewater treatment. And I remember, I was in the shower at 5 a.m. before I started work, and the lights went out. I'm the only electrician here in this island. It's pretty humid in the tropics. So you rush over to the power station to get it started again. And I'd never restarted this power station before. So it isn't that complicated if you gave it to me during the day. It's a simple place. But I just wanted the simplest, stupid questions, step by step. How do I turn this on? First, go to the panel and push this button. I wanted those really simple instructions. But there's nothing stopping you doing that now. You can go out to all of your sites and go, if I came out in the middle of the night, would the team know how to actually reset this? Would they know how to start this up? Why wait for it to happen? Just go and proactively do that, Good platforms called Noby, where you can do these video SOPs, KNOWBY, Aussie company, amazing stuff. The video SOPs that You can put on a QR code that just bring them up instantly. You can give it to people that don't have accounts. So you remove another barrier. It's all about just removing a barrier so people can follow the right process. But you should have like every SOP that's written on paper is outdated. Like we need to think of a new way to do it, whether it's a maintenance instruction, an operating instruction, or a safety instruction.
Yeah, nice. And again, coming back to those traditional things that we maybe overlook, like video, that sort of media, right? Which is great. Mate,
Yeah, and they don't need to be beautiful, right? They just need to work.
Yeah, it just needs to
Short
be
and sharp.
practical. Absolutely. It doesn't need to be perfectly edited, etc. I suppose last question to finish up on, Scott. What excites you most about where the safety industry is heading? Maybe that's to end on an optimistic question. Where is the safety industry heading? Or, is it not heading in the right direction in terms of the way we do things? What's your sort of outlook on safety? Maybe, again, to be positive, why are you optimistic about the way it's going?
I am optimistic about it in some ways. I think there's probably a bit of a fork in the road. There's and this is no different to every industry that, AI is a big part of or whatever, where there are some people that will get on board with modernization as technology changes, and there'll be some that either can't or are past that. And that's not a bad thing or disrespectful. It's just the reality. So I'm kind of more interested in who that next cohort are. And I don't think that the traditional skills that safety people have needed to have, that rote knowledge of regulations and things like that, is required as much anymore. I think you can Google that. You can build a chatbot that has all the regulations you need, and you'll be an expert in no time. The power of of influencing and engagement and doing things a little bit more exciting in a more exciting way. Project management skills are really important, and empathy, I think, is super important. So that excites me, and that's why I'm kind of constantly looking for new people to join the safety community. And a lot of them are people that probably never thought of joining safety like I didn't, or like some of our team have as well. So I'm super excited to meet people that are just excited to get stuff done and to make the world a better place, and then kind of convince them that actually doing that in the safety team is a really great pit stop. I don't think it's necessarily a career forever. Something that you do for a short period of time, some longer than others. But I think that it's a great place to come and kind of hone in your influencing skills. So when you go back as an operational leader, you go back as a better, more refined manager that kind of has an better understanding of the way the corporate world works and why things aren't, maybe a better appreciation of change isn't as easy as it can seem from the outside. So
yeah,
I'm super excited by that, and I'm super excited to be, talking on a maintenance podcast, not a safety podcast. Like, that there is this, we are kind of actually doing the same thing. We just got to kind of connect in a different way. So
yeah, absolutely.
I'm pumped. I'm pumped for maintenance people to start thinking about it.
Awesome.
Maybe I should give it a go.
Thank you, mate. Good words, Scott. I think it's been really good. We've talked about a lot of different topics, but yeah, thank you for coming on, mate. It's been a pleasure.
Good on you. We'll chat to you soon.
Take care, man. Yeah, I'll speak to you.